teacher, and hello everyone. My name is Thy Thuch. In this video, I'm making a video presentation to complete the course FND502 Statistics on Research for the academic year 2025 and 2026. In this video presentation, I'm responsible for Chapter 4, Descriptive Methods. It is a summary from the book Research Methods and Statistics, a critical thinking approach, authored by Professor Sherry Jackson, that everyone can read briefly information about Professor Sherry Jackson through my screen share. They are the table of content that I am going to do my presentation today, including observational methods, data collection, case study method, archival method that have qualitative methods, survey method, and there are the three survey methods including survey construction, administering the survey, and sampling technique, and the last one which is the summary of the chapter 4 about descriptive method. They are the learning objective. Throughout my presentation today, I will explain the difference between naturalistic and laboratory observation, explain the difference between participant and non-participant observation, explain the difference between disguised and non-disguised observation, describe how to use a checklist versus a narrative record, describe an action checklist versus a static checklist, describe the case study method, describe the archival method, describe the qualitative method, differentiate open-ended, closed-ended, and partially open-ended questions, explain the differences among loaded questions, leading questions, and the barrel questions, identify the three methods of surveying, identify the advantages and disadvantages of the three survey methods, differentiate probability and non-probability sampling, and the last one of the learning objective, which is differentiate random sampling, stratify random sampling, and cluster sampling. Without further ado, let's begin with observational method. There are two types of observational study in this presentation and chapter, including naturalistic, or we can call by other name, field observation, and laboratory, or we can call by other name, systematic observation. Observational method, in its most basic form, is as simple as it sounds, making observation of human or animal behavior. This method is not used as widely in psychology as in other disciplines such as sociology, anthropology, and anthropology, because most psychologists want to be able to do more than describe. However, this method is of great value in some situations. And about the naturalistic observation that you can see throughout the screen here, sometimes referred to as field observation, involve watching people or animals in their natural habitats. And naturalistic observation is the greatest advantage of this type of observation is the potential of observing natural or true behaviors. For this reason, naturalistic observation has greater ecological validity than most other research methods. And ecological validity refers to the extent to which research can be generalized to real-life situations. Throughout the screen here, you can see a picture in the screen here. It is an image refers to a cartoon by Sidney Harris, and the context at the bottom of the cartoon read that she been watching us for years when the hell is she going to write a book. And the cartoon depict a person with a camera observing two chimpanzees in a tree and on the ground, with one of the chimpanzees speaking the text. The cartoon is by Sidney Harris. A person is photographing two chimpanzees, and one chimpanzee is questioning when the person will write a book, implying the person have been observing them for a long time. And the sentence below, which is the options when using observation, meaning that both Goodall and Fauci use and disguise observation, meaning that study in which the participants are aware that the researcher is observing their behavior. They did not attempt to disguise themselves while making observations. Goodall's initial approach was observe the chimpanzee from a distance. Thus, she attempted to engage in non-participant observation. And non-participation in here refers to the study in which the researcher does not participate in the situation in which the research participants are involved. And it is a study in which the researcher does not take part or participate in the situation in which the research participants are involved. Then moves to the laboratory observation. An observational method that is usually less costly and time-consuming and affords more control is laboratory or systematic observation. And laboratory observation may also be conducted with the researcher as a participant in the situation. Additionally, laboratory observation, you can see the example is that a developmental psychologist could observe play behavior in children as an undisguised participant by playing with the children or by posing as a teacher or a daycare worker in the laboratory setting. In other study involving laboratory observation, the participant is disguised. And research on helping behavior refers to the altruism that often use this method. For example, researchers might state what appears to be an emergency while participants are supposedly waiting for an experiment to begin. Data collection. Data are most often collected through the use of behavioral methods, and a behavioral method can be taken in a direct, meaning that at the time the behavior occurred, or an indirect manner, meaning that via the audio or video type. And about the narrative record, are full narrative description of a participant behavior. Additionally, narrative record are full narrative record. This record may be created in a direct manner, writing note by hand, or an indirect manner, audio or video typing the participants and then taking note at a later time. Narrative record, the purpose of it is to capture in a complete manner everything the participant said or did during a specified period of time. One of the best examples of the use of narrative records is the work of Jin Pai-zi. Jin Pai-zi studied cognitive development in children and kept extensive narrative records concerning everything as a child did during the specified time period. And his records were a running account of exactly what the child said in it. About the checklist, a more structured and objective method of collecting data involves using a checklist. Furthermore, checklists enable researchers to focus on a limited number of specific behavior. Checklist in here refers to a tall list on which the researcher records attributes of the participants and whether particular behavior were observed. Researchers use two basic types of items on checklists. First, we also known by a static item. A static item is a means of collecting data on characteristics that will not change while the observations are being made. And these static features may include how many people are present, the gender, race, and age of the participant, or what the weather is like if it's relevant. For example, observation of hospital patterns might include information on general health, whereas observations of driving behavior might include the make and type of vehicle driven. The second one on type of item on the checklist, which is an action item. An action item is used to record whether specific behavior were present or absent during the observational time period. Action items could be used to record the type of stop made at a stop sign, complete, ruling, or none, or the type of play behavior observed in children, including solitary, cooperative, or parallel. About to use a checklist accurately, the person collecting the data must clearly understand what constitutes each category of behavior being observed. Here is the future subtype of the observational study that provided in the book in chapter 4 of my responding. At the left hand side, you can see about the description option, means about data collection and concern, and divided in the different column throughout the naturalistic and laboratoristic. And I suggest that you can read and check by yourself to save the time of my presentation. Allow me to move the second point. Here's the critical thinking with a question that you can imagine and make the brainstorming to understand what I am speaking about. I'd like to provide you to read 3 questions of the chapter. First, explain the differences in flexibilities and control between naturalistic and laboratory observational research. Second, every activity where you create as a concern in an observational study, which method would you recommend using? And the third one, which is why is data reduction of greater concern when using narrative records as a process to checklist? Let's go to the answer together. For answer from question number 1. Naturalistic observation has more flexibility because researchers are free to observe any behavior they may find interesting, and laboratory observation has less flexibility because the behaviors to be observed are usually determined before the study begins. It is thus difficult to change what is being observed after the study has begun, because naturalistic observation offers greater flexibility. It is also has less control, and the researcher does not control what happens during the study. And about the laboratory observation, having less flexibility also has more control the researcher determine more of the research situation. Back to question number 2. If reactivity were your greatest concern in an observational study, which method would you recommend using? If reactivity were your greatest concern, you might try using disguised observation. In addition, you might opt for a more naturalistic setting. Back to question number 3 as the last one of the critical thinking for point 1. Why is data reduction of greater concern when using narrative records as opposed to checklists? The answer is that data reduction is of greater concern when using narrative records because the narrative records must be interpreted and reduced to a quantitative form. Using multiple individuals to establish iterator reliability, checklists do not involve interpretation or data reduction because the individual collecting the data simply records whether the behavior is present or how often the behavior occurs. Let's move with case study method. One advantage of case study research is that it often suggests hypotheses for future study, as in PISI that I mentioned at the moments ago. PISI cases. It also provide a method to study rare phenomena such as rare brain disorder or diseases, as in the case of the split brain pattern. In case study may also offer some tentative support for a psychological theory. Case study research also has problems. However, the individual being observed may be atypical, in which case any generalizations made to the general population are erroneous. For example, Freud formulated a theory of personality development that he believed applies to everyone based on case study of a few atypical individual. For example, that you can see in the slideshow here. And about the archival method, this means that the researcher can never be sure whether the data are reliable or valid. In addition, the researcher cannot be sure that what is currently in the archival presents everything that was originally collected. About the qualitative methods. Qualitative research focuses on phenomena that occur in natural settings, and the data are typically analyzed without the use of statistics. Furthermore, qualitative research entails observation and structure interviewing the natural setting. The quantitative research typically starts with a hypothesis for testing, observe and collect data, statistically analyzes the data and draw conclusions. And qualitative research, researchers are far less structured and are more open to changing their research direction based on variations in the research setting and the participants. Qualitative researchers typically also make passive observations with no intent of manipulating causal variable. One important aspect of qualitative research is the coding of the data. And The research was more commonly used by other social researchers such as sociologists and anthropologists, but it's growing in applicabilities and popularities among psychologists. The survey method. And then a mean of the collecting data for descriptive purposes is used a survey. The survey is in here. You can see the example. The survey has the different type of the survey, like a mail survey versus a telephone survey. In writing the question for the survey, for example, consider the following question that you can see in the screen here is how long have you lived in Haphazard and how many years have you lived in Haphazard? It is the question in kinds of the survey construction as a writing question. For the survey construction, for the data collected to be both reliable and valid, the researcher must carefully plan the survey instrument, the type of the question used, and the order in which they appear may vary depending on how the survey is ultimately administered. I mentioned at the moment, when writing the survey question is whether to use open-ended, closed-ended, and partially open-ended or rating scale question. For those who didn't know about the open-ended, it's meaning that question for which participants formulate their own responses, and closed-ended question for which participants choose from a limited number of alternatives, and partially open-ended question-ended question with an open-ended other option. And the last one is rating scale question. It's a numerical scale on which survey respondents indicate the direct and strength of their response. In here is a sample table 4.0. It is a sample of the type of survey question that I mentioned at the moment. You can compare with the theory and the definition and the picture that I show you through my screen share. In this point, I'm gonna talk about administering the survey. In my responding of the chapter, I found that there are 3 methods of surveying mails, including mail survey, telephone surveys, and personal interview, along with the advantage and disadvantage of each. The first one is the mail survey. Mail survey are a written survey that are self-administered. And telephone survey involve telephoning participants and reading the question to them, give them to know the question, and then gaining the answer from them as the participant that we targeting. And the last one of the method of surveying is personal interviews. I think it mostly that students in nowadays at the university also use the personal interviewing as well, meaning that a personal interview in which the questions are asked face to face or physically with each other from the people who responding questionnaire and respondent who are going to answer. Maybe conduct anywhere at the individual home or on the street or in the shopping mall. Allow me to provide some definition and argument about the 3 types of surveying, starting from the first one, back to the first one is mail survey. Mail survey have several advantages. A traditional mail survey generally have less sampling bias, like a tendency of one group to be overrepresented as a sample than phone survey or personal interview. Mail survey or email. You can use mail or email. Now everyone mostly notice and know about email rather than the mail. Can be sent anywhere in the world, whereas the in-person interview tends to be restricted to defined geographic area. Moreover, mail survey also have the advantage of allowing the researcher to collect data on more sensitive information, and it is also have some potential problem as well. However, one problem is that no one is available to answer questions if they arise. Thus, if an item is unclear to the respondent, it may be less plain or misinterpreted, which biases the result. And another problem with email or mail survey is generally low return rate. I think everyone mostly experience on this consequences of from mail survey as well. And telephone survey, similarly, like I mentioned at the moment, telephone survey do have several advantages. First, they are more time consuming than a mail survey because the researchers must read each of the questions and record the responses. Second, they can be costly, and the researcher must call the individual themselves or pay others to do the calling. If the calls are long distance, then the cost is even greater. And the last one, or the third one, is the problem of interviewer bias. For although most households have telephone, based on the chapter, they found that 92.4% of households in the United States had phone in 2005. Telephone availability varied by state. And personal interview, also similar to my emphasis at the moment as well. Like a variation on the personal interview is the focus group interview. Focus group interview involve interviewing 6 to 10 individuals, for example. At the same time, you can do it as well. And its focus group usually meet for 1 to 3 hours. And the question asked for to participants are usually open-ended and addressed to the whole group. So regarding to my explanation about the 3 methods of surveying, including the mail survey, telephone surveys, and interpersonal interview, allow me to make a briefly in the summary of this explanation. The 3 survey methods offer different advantages and disadvantages. Meanwhile, mail surveys are usually less expensive but have a very poor response rate. At the time, telephone survey have problem too, but offer the opportunity for question clarification. And the last one is the personal interview, the most costly and time consuming and may suffer the most from interviewer bias. However, they allow the researcher the greatest amount of flexibility in asking questions and far more leeway in interpreting responses. And the researcher's choice will depend on the research question at hand on themselves. Let's go to another point, which is the sampling technique. In almost all cases, it is feasible to survey the entire population. Instead, we select a subgroup or sample from the population and use the survey to them to draw any reliable and valid conclusions concerning the population. It is imperative that the sample be like the population, a representative sample. In this chapter, we will discuss 3 types of probability sampling that you can see throughout the screens here, including random sampling, stratified random sampling, and the last one, which is the cluster sampling. Allow me to elaborate one by one. Start from random sampling. It is achieved through random selection, in which each member of the population is equally likely to be chosen as part of the sample. And stratified random sampling, a sample technique designed to ensure that subgroup or strata are fairly represented. For those who didn't know about the subgroup or strata, it means that are likely interchangeable terms that refers to non-overlapping group within the population, and it divided based on shared characteristic like age, gender, or location. Moreover, the stratified random sample allows you to take into account the different subgroup or people in the population that have guarantee that the sample accurately represents the population on specific characteristic. And the last one from the sampling technique, which is cluster sampling. Often the population is too large for random sampling of any sort. In these cases, it is common to use cluster sampling, as the name implies. Cluster sampling involves using participants who are already part of group cluster. And a sampling technique in which cluster of participants that represent the population are used. For example, if you were interested in the surveying students at a large university where it might not be possible to use true random sampling, you might sample from classes that require several students at the university, such as English composition. And if the classes require several students, they should contain a good mix of students. And if you use several classes, the sample should represent the population. Is the sample of the cluster sampling. About the sampling technique on the non-probability sampling is used when the individual members of the population do not have an equal likelihood of being selected to be a member of the sample. In the chapter, there are 2 types of non-probability sampling, including the convenient sampling and the quota sampling. Back to the definition and finding the convenient sampling. A sampling technique in which participants are obtained wherever they can be found, and typically where it is convenient for the researcher. And convenient sampling involves getting participants wherever you find them, and wherever is convenient. This is sometimes referred to as a haphazard sampling. For example, if you wanted a sample of 100 college students, you could stand outside the library and ask people who pass by to participate, or you could ask students in some of your classes to participate. And about the quota sampling, a sampling technique that involves ensuring that the sampling is like the population on a certain characteristic, but uses convenient sampling to obtain the participants. And quota sampling involves ensuring that the sample is like the population on a certain characteristic. Here's the question in critical thinking 4.2. There are 4 questions in here. One start from question number 1. With which survey methods is interviewer bias of greatest concern? 2. Share High had 4,500 surveys returned to her. This is a large sample, something desirable. So, what was the problem with using all the survey return? 3. How is stratified random sampling different from random sampling? And the last one, question number 4, is that what are the problems with the following survey question and the sub question in here? There are 3 in question number 4. A. Do you agree that school systems should be given more money for cultures and recreational activity? B. Do you favor eliminating the wasteful excesses in the city budget? C. Most people feel that teachers are underpaid. Do you agree? The answer is that allow me to read to you, and you can read at the same time with me as well. 1. Interviewer bias is of greatest concern with personal interviews because the interviewer is physically with the respondent. It is also of some concern with telephone interviews. However, because the telephone interview is not actually with the respondent, it is an as great a concern as it is with personal interviews. Second, the problem with using all 4,500 return surveys was that High sent out 100,000 surveys. Thus, 4,500 represented as a very small return rate in 4.5%. If the 100,000 individuals who were sent surveys were a representative sample, it is doubtful that the 4,500 who returned them were representative of the population. The third question number 3, is that stratify random sampling involve randomly selecting individuals from strata or group. That I mentioned the definition of the strata at the moment ago as well. Using stratified random sampling ensures that subgroup or strata are fairly represented. This does not always happen when sample random sampling is used. And question number 4, and its answer is that A. It is double-barrel question. It should be divided into 2 questions, one pertaining to money for computers and one pertaining to money for recreational activity. B. This is a loaded question. The phrase wasteful excesses load the question emotionally. And C. This is a leading question using the phrase most people feel sway the respondent. And here's the chapter 4 review exercises. I will read for you and you can take note with the key answer throughout the exercise from 1 to 12. 1. Observational study in which the researcher does not participate in the situation in which the research participants are involved utilize non-participant observation. 2. The extent to which an experimental situation can be generalized generalized to natural setting and behaviors is known as ecological validity. 3. Observational study in which the participants are unaware that the researcher is observing their behavior utilize disguised observation. 4. Narrative records are fully narrative descriptions of a participant behavior. 5. Static item is a type of item used on a tool list on which attributes that will not change are recorded. 6. Sampling bias involves a tendency for one group to be overrepresented in a study. 7. When participants give a response that they believe is deemed appropriate by society, they are giving a socially desirable response. 8. Using a random selection involves generating a random sample in which each member of the population is equally likely to be chosen as part of the sample. 9. Stratified random sampling is a sampling technique designed to ensure that subgroups are fairly represented. 10. Questions for which participants choose from a limited number of alternatives are known as closed-ended questions. 11. A numerical scale on which survey respondents indicate direction and strength of their responses is a rating scale. And the last one, 12. A question that sway a respondent to answer its desired manner is leading question. And the next is the chapter 4 review exercises. Is the selection the single best answer for each of the following question. And if you have trouble answering any of the questions, restudy the relevant material. But in this review exercises are not a reading for you, and you can see the answer throughout each number from number 1 to number 5 in this slideshow together. Number 1, the answer is C. Number 2, the answer is A. Number 3, letter is A. Number 4, answer is C. And number 5, answer is B. And number 6, the answer is A. Number 7, answer is B. Number 8, answer is D. Number 9, answer is A. Number 10, answer is D. Number 11, answer is C. Number 12, answer is A. Number 13, answer is B. And number 14, answer is A. Throughout my presentation today of the chapter that I'm responsible, allow me to make a summary from the beginning of my presentation to the end of the point in my table of content that I mentioned at the moment from my beginning of the presentation. In the chapter 4, I responsible descriptive method. And throughout your listening of my presentation, you will notice that we discuss the various ways of conducting a descriptive study. And specialized in the 5 methods presented were the observational method that have naturalistic versus laboratory observation that I compare with each other throughout my explanation and example that I raised. And the case study method, the archival method, that have the qualitative method and the survey method, including mail survey, telephone survey, or personal interview as a survey as well. And several advantages and disadvantages of each method were discussed, and I think you can notice by yourself For observational methods, important issues include reactivity, experimental expectancy, time, cost control, and flexibility. For the case study method is limited because it describes only one or few people and it is very subjective in nature, but it is often a good means of beginning a research project. The archival method is limited by the fact uh, that the data already exist and were collected by someone other than the researcher. The qualitative method focuses on phenomena that occurred in natural setting, and because the data are typically analyzed without the use of statistics, this might be a concern for some researchers, and the very survey method may have some problems of bias sample, poor return rate, interviewer biases, so solely desirable responses, and expense. Various methods of sampling participants were discussed as well, along with how best to write a survey and arrange the questions on the survey. Keep in mind that all of the methods presented here are descriptive in nature. They allow researchers to describe what has been observed in a group of people or animals, but they do not allow you to make accurate predictions or determine cause and effect relationships. In the content chapter, discuss descriptive statistics that can be used to summarize the data collected in the study. And the next chapter, you will receive the video presentation from another student that respond to their chapter. In this presentation, I only responsible for descriptive method. So my presentation today come to an end. Thank you so much for your listening and pay attention.